I'm Larry Weeks, and this is Bounce.
To me, it's just my model, and it's not even really a model. It's just kind of a real world. Here's how this works for me and the successful people I know is I'm interested. Let me look around and see how people who have done the thing that I want to do did it so that I can create a process that actually works. Not one that I want to follow because it feels good, but one that I should follow because it will work. Motivation is something you can actually create yourself by enjoying little small successes every day, whether that's you did something a little bit better than you used to, or you accomplished something very small that makes you say, wow, that was cool. I got somewhere. I feel good about myself. And that creates that little bit of motivation that gets you to the next day. And all you really need is enough motivation to get to the next day to get going.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Bounce Podcast. Today on the podcast, my guest is Jeff Haden. Jeff runs Blackbird Media, is a top LinkedIn influencer, making him part of an exclusive club. It's a global collective of 500 plus of the world's foremost thinkers, leaders, and innovators. And he's also the author of the book, The Motivation Myth, How High Achievers Really Set Themselves Up to Win. It is also the topic of our podcast. In our personal and professional lives, there are always things to do that are not getting done, whether it's learning a new skill, looking for a job, taking up a new activity, New Year's resolutions, things of that nature. And our first efforts in doing these things seem to be some sort of goal setting or time management methods, which are fine in and of themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of goal-oriented problems stem from places other than time management issues. They are motivation issues. When you're not motivated, a new planner pad or a productivity method will do very little to help. And believe me, I've tried them all and I do use them and I do believe in them. But does motivation or the lack of motivation have to stop us from achieving our goals? So today I talked with Jeff Haden about his book, and he goes over the motivation myths and explains his principles and his concepts in regards to motivating yourself, or what do you do when you're not motivated? Jeff not only talked with a lot of great people who've achieved their dreams, and pretty big ones as well, stars like Venus Williams and business folk like Richard Branson, but he spent a lot of hours applying his motivational principles to himself. And I believe this book is kind of the result of his personal experiment and what he learned about motivation, which he's going to share with us and you today. And in our conversation, Jeff goes into great detail on how an emphasis on action brings about results, which in turn breeds motivation for more action and thus more results. And I'm oversimplifying it, but I think you're going to get a lot out of this podcast when it comes to getting things done and how to bypass or start when you're lacking the motivation that you feel you need to kind of get started or you may be waiting for. He gives some great tips on coming up with a goal when you're drawing a blank, when you're asked the question, what would you do if you could do anything? And Jeff emphasizes that his motivation techniques can help anyone, even though he's found it in a lot of the high achievers. So, are you tired of starting and stopping, or are you waiting for motivation? Do you think you have a problem with a lack of motivation? Then this podcast is for you. I think you'll find it very helpful. So let's talk to Jeff. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week, Larry.
So a couple things off the top. I read that you write for LinkedIn. You're an influencer, right? And Inc. Is Inc. still an ongoing gig?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I started writing for Inc. If you want to know the story, I worked in manufacturing for 20 years and decided that I ran a plant. So I have a pretty solid business background, and I decided that I wanted to do something different and decided I wanted to write, even though I had no writing training, education, talent, nothing. And so I started ghostwriting because, that was a way to, generate some income from that and see if it was a viable business. I didn't quit my job before I started writing. I proved it out on nights and weekends and stuff. And so I did reach a point, though, as a ghostwriter. Ghostwriting is like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you can't talk about Fight Club. Well, ghostwriting is the same way. And it's really hard to stand in front of someone who you want to do some work for. And they say, oh, well, show me some things you've done. Well, I can't. Who have you worked for? Well, I can't tell you that either because I signed non-disclosure agreements. I feel like my firstborn child is tied up in there as surety somewhere. And so writing for Inc., I just decided, well, actually, my wife convinced me that I needed some stuff in my own name so that I would at least have something to show people of what I'd done. And also it was, if you read something of mine and you liked it and you happen to need a ghostwriter and you noticed that I was a ghostwriter, well, then maybe you would contact me. So it was as if people, it worked out that it's as if they pay me to advertise what I do. But because I'm paid by the page view and I average about 1,000,007 page views a month, it's actually a very lucrative thing as well. So that you didn't ask, but I went ahead and told you, but that's kind of where the link or the Inc. thing came from. And I became an influencer because a lot of my Inc. stuff was so popular on LinkedIn when LinkedIn was just aggregating articles instead of letting people publish on their own. And so they realized that I knew how to get an audience and they invited me in. So, clearly that's the only time I'll ever be on a list that includes like Richard Branson and Bill Gates and people like that. But, hey, I'll take it.
That is very cool. You reinvented yourself, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I think I read about this. So you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in working with Inc., you did like a no risk thing with them. You said, or you got a certain amount of views and then they were interested in you or something.
Yeah, I knew that, writing for a major business publication, I knew that I had nothing that recommended me to them. They had no reason to say yes to me. All I could do is say I've ghostwritten for a lot of people. I have a really big Rolodex. Can't tell you who's in my Rolodex, but I can do this stuff. So I wrote some stuff and sent it to them and said, here's examples of what I would do. And then I said, and you don't even have to pay me at first or ever really, because to me, I just saw it as I'll do this a few times a month. I had ulterior motives for it. And so it was fine. But then, the stuff that I did, I like to win any game I play. And so I looked at it and thought, well, if I'm going to be doing this, then I want a lot of readers. Why not? Right. So I tried to deconstruct how I would get there. And I can sum it all up by just saying, what does the audience want? What would the audience appreciate? What do they need? Not what do I want to write, but what would they appreciate and want to read? And if you figure that out and you do a good job of that, then people will come to you. You can't write what you want to write unless you're Stephen King. Then that's okay. But for a guy like me, I had to do that. And so very quickly they said, hey, Wade, we're happy to pay you to do this. I think because they didn't want to lose me, because I had shown that I could generate an audience.
That's a great, but that's a great lesson in not only reinvention, but also for anybody who wants to break into an industry or do something else that's totally different. You went in saying, this is what I can do. And you gave free stuff. It's almost like, let me work for you for free and I'll prove myself kind of a thing. Right?
I think the thing that people get hung up on is, say you've been successful in one thing. And I was running a plant. So I was in the manufacturing world. I was very successful. That's fine. But I had no background, no success, no nothing when I wanted to go into another field. So you have to be.
And people will box you in. Yeah.
Sure. But you'll box yourself in because you'll sit there and say, well, wow, I'm not doing this for free and I'm not starting at the bottom and I'm not doing all these things because look at me over here. But you're not over there. You're in this new avenue. So you have to take a clear look at yourself and say, what from the outside do people actually see me as? And they're going to see you as a person who brings nothing. So you have to say, I'm going to be humble and I'm going to say, all right, I need to do this and I need to do that. And I might need to work for free. And I might need to make all these compromises that don't feel fun because, I'm actually this powerful, wonderful person in this other area. But here, this is who I am. And, I get people all the time that will write to me and say, I would love to write for Inc. or I would love to write for somebody else. And I would say, okay, here's what I did. And I'll lay it out and they'll say, well, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, okay, but it's like that thing from that scene in The Wire that I love when that show from HBO where Marlo says to this guy, you want it to be one way, but it's the other way. We often want things to be our way, but it's the other way. And the people who are willing to say, you know what, it is the other way, and I'm going to play in that field and I'm going to leverage that. That's how you get somewhere. If you want it to be your way, it rarely turns out to end up your way. if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. A couple steps back to take some steps forward. Yeah. That's a great story. That's great. That's your next book, Reinvention or something.
Well, I knew my goal, and I knew where I was starting from. And so I just laid out a path and said, okay, well, this is me. And all right, what do I have to do?
Yeah, to some degree, that could be the hardest part, is knowing what you want to do and then, kind of going through. So, which brings us to this whole thing about motivation, right? So first of all, I'm a big tennis fan. And I think Venus Williams played a part in sparking ideas. Is that right? Could you tell me about that?
Yes. Yeah, I was, and Venus, by the way, if you're a Venus fan, she is as delightful and charming in person as she appears.
That is so good to hear. That is so good to hear, because I love her, man.
Is so
She's
sweet.
Laughing and smiling. Just
Yep. And she complimented, I did a video interview series with her, and she complimented my pants. So, I'm fashion challenged. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I was talking to Venus, and everybody knows Venus, the tennis player, and clearly she's massively accomplished. And she's carrying on a career when, careers in tennis, especially for women, they end around 25, 27 years old.
Unless you're Roger Federer. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. And she's late 30s and still doing well. But she does other stuff. Like she has a athletic wear company that she actually does the designs. She doesn't farm it out and just put her name on it. She does the designs. She runs that. She has an interior design company. She does the designs because she likes all that. So she's got all these things that she's really, really good at. And she said, at one point when I was talking to her, I said, man, you must have known you wanted to do that when you were a little kid. That must have been like your dream all along. She said, no, I just was interested in tennis. My dad clearly was interested in tennis, and I just wanted to get better. And the same thing is true for everything she's done. She didn't have this lightning bolt moment of, wow, this is my purpose. This is my plan. This is all the motivation I need to go get it. She just kind of worked her way along and found a passion for something. So I contrasted that with all of the people who tell me that they feel stuck, that they can't seem to find motivation, that they want to achieve something, but they can't seem to get off the couch. And I flipped that around and thought about Venus, and I thought about all the other really successful people I get to talk to. And the big difference was that the people who achieve the things they want to achieve don't see motivation as something that comes to them from outside. It's not something you get. Motivation is something you can actually create yourself by enjoying little small successes every day, whether that's you did something a little bit better than you used to, or you accomplished something very small that makes you say, wow, that was cool. I got somewhere. I feel good about myself. And that creates that little bit of motivation that gets you to the next day. And all you really need is enough motivation to get to the next day to get going. You don't need lifelong motivation. I don't know anybody that gets that. You just need the little ones. And so that kind of started me thinking about, okay, if that's how successful people do what they do, then how do you break that down? And how do you create a process for basically anyone to follow to basically achieve anything that they would like to achieve?
So there's a lot there I want to unpack and ask you about. So
yeah, no, I went way around the barn. Sorry. I talk in paragraphs, not in sentences.
No, that's great. But let's talk about ground zero. So there are some people that know what they want to do, or discover something and get excited about it and are motivated to do it. So somewhere along the lines, I don't know, but Venus was interested in fashion, or she was enjoying tennis, and then instead of trying to chew up the whole goal, she just maybe played around, what have you. But there was this spark of trigger of, I want to do this. So to that ground zero, does one, in your opinion, Jeff, then need to just experiment with a lot of different things?
I think what you do is you're right. People typically have something they are at least interested in. They think, hey, that might be something I like to do. And maybe they even project outwards and say, and I have this huge goal at the other end that I would really love to achieve. So I don't know, let's use a really simple example. Say you decide on your bucket list that running a marathon is something you'd like to do. Millions of people have that on their list. That's something you're interested in. So you've got that. So that's the motivation to at least try. So you bring that to it. Although if you want to, in a minute, we can talk about how you can find the motivation to do something you could care less about. Because I've done that. So you're at least interested. But the problem is if you sit there and say, okay, I think I would like to run a marathon. If early on you look out and you are only focused on the 26 miles that you have to run, and you can only run a mile or two right now, that distance is so big and so huge, it's actually demotivating, because if you go out today and you run your mile and that's all you can do, and you lay on the couch and you're wiped out, and you look across that distance between here, which is me wiped out after a mile, and there, which is I got to do 26 of these, you're going to give up. And I think that's oftentimes why people give up, because they focus so heavily on that big goal at the end, and then they compare themselves to where they are right now, and it seems impossible. But if you just say to yourself, I think I would like to run a marathon. Cool. That's my goal. I'll let my goal inform the process that I create. And I'll create a process and a plan that I can work to get to where I want to be. Today, then, I look at my plan, and if my plan is to run a mile and I run that mile, I get to feel good about myself, because I did what I set out to do today, and I can feel good. I can check it off the list. That's fun. That will give you enough motivation that tomorrow you look at your plan, and if it's to run another mile, whatever it is on your plan, do that. And if you do that for a period of time, you're accumulating all these successes. And a really cool thing happens that we haven't talked about yet. But instead of being a guy or gal who forces themselves to go out every day and run, you become a runner in your mind, because you've become the thing that you are trying to do. And that's really cool, because then it becomes a lot more automatic to go out and work your plan, because that's what you do. A great example for me, I got into cycling at one point, and I hated the bike, but I couldn't run because my knees were bad, and I wanted a cardio exercise outlet. So I started riding, hated it. And then after a couple of weeks, I started to like it a little bit, because I'd gotten better. I was a little bit faster, a little better shape, could ride a little bit farther. And then a few months into it, I realized that without even thinking about it, in my mind, I had become a cyclist, however humble and however amateur, but I felt like I was part of this bigger community of people who rode bikes and were cyclists. That's a really cool moment. And when you become the thing that you were trying to do, that's an extra source of motivation. And it actually makes it so that you don't necessarily need motivation, because it's who you are. My favorite example is if you have kids, when you get up in the morning, do you have to motivate yourself to take care of your kids? No, you just do it because you're a parent. So when you are a runner, you go run. When you are a leader, you lead people. It's just what you do. But the key is to not think about that big goal at the end right away. You let that inform your process, but then create a process and just follow your process and focus on the day-to-day.
So when you picked up riding, did you think you were going to enjoy it?
No. I was sure I was going to hate it, but I hated the fact that I was in poor cardio shape more than I hated the fact that I was going to ride a bike.
So that's an interesting phenomenon. There's a David Burns. I had him on the show. He's a kind of the pioneer in cognitive behavioral therapy, but he's got a tool called the pleasure predicting sheet. It's really interesting, where you list the activity that you either have to do or you may want to do. Then you list a column next to the activity you predict in percentages up to, let's say, 100% totally enjoyable. You predict what your pleasure is. Then you do the activity. Then you have another column next to it. What was the actual enjoyment percentage? And a lot of times when you do that, you could be surprised by how much more you enjoyed it than you think you would. So it's one way to kind of get off the couch to say, this is an experiment. I don't think I'm going to like this, but it's probably either good for me or there's some other reason to do it.
But the cool thing about what you just described is that if you stick with it, I'll guarantee you your enjoyment percentage will go up.
That's
and the reason for that is because you gain a little bit of skill, or you get a little better about it. Something improves, because effort creates improvement, and we all enjoy doing things that we're good at. And so naturally, you're going to enjoy a little bit more doing something that you are a little better at. So if you give it some time, excuse me, then your enjoyment percentage is also going to go up. So, if you just do that once, if you predict your percentage and then you rate your percentage, if you say, wow, that was way off, I'm going to quit, I think you're selling yourself short, because you might find that over time, your enjoyment actually exceeds what you predicted.
So that's an interesting, you could add another column where you repeat that process to the same activity and see if that percentage goes up over time. And to your point, it probably does, since there's some form of mastery that.
Yeah. You just have to give yourself some time. I always tell people when they start something that's hard or different, like say that you're going to start training for a marathon, you have to commit to at least doing 7 to 10 days of whatever your plan is, because those first few days are horrible. And sometimes you'll even feel worse on the fourth day than you did on the first, just because that's how it goes. But if you can hang in there past that, say 7 or 10 days, you've given yourself enough time that you can start to see some daylight, and you can start to see that light at the end of the tunnel getting a little bit bigger. And to me, if you can't commit to doing 7 to 10 days of something that you think you want to do, well, then you probably shouldn't start at all. Because we can all do something for a week or two. You can. And if you can't do that, then maybe you need to pick something you're a little bit more interested in.
Yeah, and part of that pleasure prediction sheet, just for the audience, has helped me where things like, and we're going to talk about this. You said you've got a way to how to get motivated in something that you really don't want to do, but and that pleasure predicting sheet kind of gets me through it. Like I'm predicting, I'm going to hate this. I'm only going to like it 10%, but I got to do it, so I'm going to put it up there. And it makes me do it. And then I realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm up to 50%. That wasn't that bad. So then it's reinforcing. So then I'll do it again. I'm like, oh, this is all in my head.
Isn't it funny how that works? It very seldom are things as bad as we think we are going to be. And oftentimes that's what makes you procrastinate, because you're convinced that whatever it is you're going to do is going to be really bad. And I forget who said it, but I think the guy that founded Pinterest, he has this 5-minute rule. So he says if he thinks he's about to procrastinate, he tells himself, okay, I will just commit to doing 5 minutes of this. And if I still hate it, or if I still don't feel it after that 5 minutes, I give myself permission to quit. But of course, if you do that 5 minutes, you never quit, because you realize, okay, this isn't that bad. And then you build a little bit of momentum, because you realize, okay, I'm rolling here. I can make this happen. I can make this work. It's a really cool tool for getting off the procrastination cycle, because it is never as bad as you make it out to be.
Right. Yeah. Tim Ferriss has something like that, where he says, if you're starting a new habit or trying to start a new habit, do the very minimum amount. In fact, do less than what you think you can to start.
Right.
He said, in other words, even if you could do more, don't do it.
Well, it also happens to you, and I promise I'll let this go, but I'm fascinated by the procrastination topic as well. I write for a living. So you would think that it would be fairly automatic and effortless, but I get projects where I'll procrastinate. And I had one recently where I was going to write a script for a podcast, which I had never done before. So I was going to write something for someone else to use for their podcast. And it was about a 45-minute thing. And I put it off because I wasn't sure how to do it. And I'd never done it before. And it seemed really hard. And I finally ran out of time and had to start. And within 5 minutes, I was like, this is actually fun. I think this is cool. And I think this is going to turn out really well. And I thought, what a dope I am for thinking this was going to be horrible. And all I had to do was start. And if you can just start, it clears away all that crap. It's the, what's the Churchill line? All we have to fear. No, that was Roosevelt. All we have to fear is fear itself. Well, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
That's a good point. So I want to get back to motivation and models of motivation, because there's so much literature, and I'm assuming that you've kind of gone through the literature on motivation, and let me know where your model fits into these other models, and maybe they overlap, but like the Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins kind of models, right? Work up this feeling, a belief or what have you, then that kicks in the motivation. So Tony Robbins has this model. I think it goes something like, you have potential, maybe it's a circle, potential, belief, action, results. So if, you have this untapped potential, but to activate that potential, if you have a sense of certainty about something or belief, and his point is people don't do things because they don't believe they can, which I'm sure is true. But once that belief reaches a certain tipping point, then you take an action. And then to our point that we talked about earlier, you get some momentum or results, which then makes you realize, oh, I can do this. That feeds into the belief, and then you act again, and it's the circular, tap the potential via belief. So your model, and we talked about that a bit, is, and don't only put words in your mouth, but it's something along the line of do something small, get a result, and some success from that.
Yeah, I love Tony, but the belief part of that model, I struggle with because, you know, a lot of us are skeptics, and we're definitely skeptical about our own talents. We tend to underrate our talents and abilities. And so that idea that you're going to find the belief before you've actually earned any level of belief, I think that's really hard. It's kind of the look in the mirror and say, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And that's really hard. Whereas to me, it's just my model, and it's not even really a model. It's just kind of a real world. Here's how this works for me and the successful people I know. Is I'm interested. Let me look around and see how people who have done the thing that I want to do did it, so that I can create a process that actually works. Not one that I want to follow because it feels good, but one that I should follow because it will work. And then let me start working that process. Let me give it 7 to 10 days so that I can allow that to give me some actual results to evaluate it. And then by enjoying some of those small successes and realizing that, I do have more in me than I thought, I do have more ability than I thought, I can do this thing. I may not get to be world class, but I can get to a really cool level. That is what generates some belief that lets you say, you know what, I can do this. This does work. But to me, you don't get the belief part. It's not genuine until you've done something that allows you to believe that that is actually true. Otherwise, you're just looking in a mirror saying, I am awesome, I'm going to crush it. And I don't know very many people that can use that kind of fuel to actually get them to do hard things. I can't. It doesn't work for me. That kind of self-talk does not work for me. The self-talk that works for me is to say, you know what, yesterday I ran a mile and it sucked, but I did it. And so I can do it again today. That's the kind that works for me.
So your model would sort of be take a little action and get a little success because you completed that small action. And then that leads to a result that's motivating, which then causes you to take more action to do the thing again or repeat the thing. You get more success, you get a little better, more motivation, more success.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it is a self-reinforcing cycle. It's almost like a virtuous flywheel, if you want to think about it that way. But it is predicated on the fact that you have to, whatever your process is, whatever the things you are actually doing, they have to be things that will get you to where you want to go and that will allow you to actually improve. That's a really key point. So it's one of the chapters
in my book. The small actions you're talking about.
Yeah, they have to be realistic, real world. This will get me where I want to be. It's the analogy I like to use is if we use the marathon again, if you decide you want to run a marathon and you go to your local gym and you talk to a personal trainer, and I have nothing against personal trainers, but if you talk to the personal trainer, typically they are taught to evaluate you, evaluate your health, talk to you about your interests, talk to you about your goals, all this stuff. And then at the end, they'll lay something out that will probably feel good to you as a program. The problem is the stuff that feels good when you're trying to achieve something really big probably isn't going to allow you to succeed because it's not enough to get you to where you want to go. So I would rather, if I want to run a marathon, I would rather find someone who has run 5 or 6 and say, hey, I'm not a runner, but I think I want to run a marathon. If you were me, what would you do? And I guarantee you they will lay out a harder program than what the personal trainer will, but I'll guarantee you that the program they lay out is way more likely to get you to where you want to go. And if I'm going to put some period of time into any effort, then I would rather put time into it that has a really good chance of me succeeding as opposed to putting effort in that feels good but probably isn't going to let me succeed. Because 6 months later, when you look back, all the effort is gone. You don't feel that anymore. What you care about is where you are. And if you haven't gotten to a better place, then to me, you've wasted your time.
So I think you have a statement in your book that says the only way is the hard way. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. At least for me. I'm sure there are more talented, more educated, more connected, more whatever people out there that don't necessarily have to take the hard way. But I don't know anybody that's done anything that is really difficult that hacked their way there. The whole idea that there's some magic shortcut, that there's Daniel LaRusso in Karate Kid and, if do right, no can defend or something like whatever that was on the crane kick. I don't know any successful people that have done that. They all work harder and smarter, but they all work harder than most people. That's how they get to where they are.
And what you're talking about, because earlier we were talking about taking a small action versus you have the overwhelming large goal, but take a small action, something that is doable, but it may still be hard, right?
Sure.
But it's something that you can bite off. And I think you went through this, right? You did was it a marathon or a bike?
I decided that I was riding a bike a little bit. I hadn't done it much. And I do better sticking to things if there's some, not necessarily just some fuzzy goal, but like something I actually have to do at the end. So I thought, okay, there's this Gran Fondo, which is Gran Fondos are just mass participation cycling events. They're kind of like century rides, and they're not supposed to be competitive, but they are, because anybody that wants to ride 100 miles is probably a competitive person. So I picked one where I live that it had 4 mountains involved, like 11,000 feet of climbing. It was 102 miles, and I think I had 4 months to train for it. So I talked to a guy that lived nearby that's a professional mountain bike racer who won national championships and all sorts of stuff. And I said, hey, I want to ride your Gran Fondo. And he laughed and I said, what should I do? And he said, well, he laughed and he's told me to give up or not even try. And I said, no, seriously. And so he laid out a program for me. And the first day I had to go out and ride like 3 hours, which that is not a small bite. But based on the time frame that I had established and the size of the goal I wanted to achieve, that's pretty much what I had to do. So I hated him for about a week.
Was that just a 3-hour ride, or was it a specific?
Oh, no, there was specific stuff within. I had intervals I had to do. I had heart rate zones that my heart rate needed to be in. He mapped it out because, he's a pro. So, yeah, it was very specific. And it was very hard. And I came home and thought I wanted to die. But I did it. And I would never have thought ahead of time that I could. But I did, because we can always do more than we think. And that alone was enough to get me to the next day, because the next day was a little bit easier. It was different and a little bit easier. And I thought, okay, I did yesterday. I can do this. And I just stuck with it for a week and a half or so, and then realized that, you know what? I can do this. It's going to be hard and it's going to get harder, but I can do this because I could see that it was already starting to work. And that's the key with any process you create. It needs to be hard enough that it forces some adaptation and some improvement so that you can see that success, which will motivate you to keep going. It's like people that want to lose a pound a month. That's really hard, because you're dieting, but you're not seeing any change. But if you can lose a pound or so a week, then that's a whole different deal, because you can see the change and you can realize it's working.
How long was that race?
It was 102 miles. There was 11,000 feet of climbing. It went across 4 mountains, and 2 of them were gravel dirt. It was awful, and it rained that day. I did it I think I finished in 6 hours, and I think I was like 28 minutes, which put me squarely in the middle of it put me squarely in the middle of everybody that entered, and I think I was in the top third in my age group, which is kind of meaningless if you think about it. But nonetheless, it made me feel really good. It was one of the hardest and best days of my life. Let's put it that way.
So you talked earlier about how to get motivated, or processes for motivation when there's something you don't want to do, but you have to do it.
Yeah. Or you don't even have to do.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Yeah, to prove my whole premise of that, if you follow a process for a little bit and you get those daily successes, that you can find the motivation that you need on a regular basis. I decided one year that I wanted to do 100,000 push-ups that year. I also did 50,000 sit-ups, but I don't tend to talk about that because I hate sit-ups, and I've tried to repress that part of the experience. So I broke the 100,000 down into, that's 274 a day. So if I did 274 push-ups a day, at the end of the year, I would have 100,000. The reason that I chose something like that is because there was a fitness component to it. It's kind of meaningless, but there's a fitness component, so that's positive. But also, I think a lot of things that we try to achieve really are numbers-based, that if you put in the reps, and you put in the reps for a long enough period of time, then you can get to a really, really good place. Like if you want to write a book, if you break it down into a certain number of pages or words a day and you click that off, at the end, you will have a manuscript. Probably you have to work on it, but you will have a manuscript. There are tons of things that are numbers based. So I broke it down and said, okay, every day it's 274. I actually did 300 a day because I wanted a buffer in case I got sick one day or something happened. And at first it was something I had to force myself to do. But within a couple of weeks, it was fun to write in 300 on my spreadsheet for that day. And keep in mind, I didn't have the column foot to a total number because I didn't want to look down and say, oh, I've done 7,000. That's really fun. But God, I got 93,000 more to go. I just wanted to do my day thing. And I kept clicking them off. And within not very long, it started to be fun because I could do more reps per set. I could get the whole thing done quicker. I started playing little games. Like I would say, okay, let me see if I only take 30-second rests in between, what do my sets look like? If I take longer rests, can I do longer sets? I was playing all kinds of number games and improvement games and stuff like that. And I got to where both the push-ups and the sit-ups took, I don't know, it was about 15, 17 minutes or something to do the whole thing. So it was a very small part of my day, but it was really fun. And in my mind, I kind of became the guy that did push-ups and sit-ups every day.
This is the thing you picked that you really didn't want to do.
I had no reason to do it. There was no purpose. There was no goal. It got me nowhere professionally or personally other than maybe in a little bit better shape. But it was just something I picked arbitrarily to prove the power of numbers and also to prove to myself that if you just create a process and follow your process, you can start to enjoy the thing you do because you're improving, and that will give you enough motivation to keep going. And you accumulate some really cool thing.
So there's some keys there, it seems to me. One is the tracking. One is noting what you accomplished for that day. I mean, I don't think this works, you tell me, if you don't do that, right?
No, it doesn't work at all because the half of the joy of it is filling out that sheet. Jerry Seinfeld is famous for this, but he has calendars that have squares, and he puts a check or an X mark on every day when he writes a joke. And that's his goal, is to write a good joke every day. And he has years worth of these calendars stored away, but that's his process. And the big fun for him is being able to put that X mark up there because it's a sign of, hey, I did what I set out to do and it's a job well done. I think the tracking is huge. But what's important on my goal is that I didn't have it foot to the total, because that meant every day I would have been comparing where I was that day to where I had to go. And it's a really long distance. But if you just compare what you have to do today to today, it's much shorter.
So there's a great book. It's old. I don't even remember who wrote it at this point. I'm assuming it's still in print. It's called The Game of Work. And I read it a long time ago, but the premise, this guy was a management consultant, Jeff, and he would go in and he would use a keeping score system to increase the productivity in a business. So basically, if it was a sales objective or some other objective, they would post a big scoreboard and have individuals try to beat their own records. They would set whatever they were doing as the baseline record, and then the game, if you will, was for that person to then try to beat whatever their best was, and the whole key was to have some kind of scorecard. But the point of the book was that it made it fun.
Oh yeah.
Because you're kind of challenging yourself, making it maybe more intrinsic, from a goal standpoint.
Sure. I think the most fun everybody is competitive to some degree or another, but I think the fun competition is when you're competing with yourself. And so if you're measuring against yourself, then as long as you keep working at it, you will get better and you get to win. You may never be LeBron James if you're out playing basketball, but if you're competing against yourself and you're what you are today versus what you become tomorrow, then you can always win. And that's really fun.
So you hit on it briefly earlier about some people are stuck. They don't know what to do. And let's say it could be a career, work, business, whatever. Somebody's in between and they're not sure what to do with themselves. Do you have any tips for that person, how to get off the dime or find that thing?
Well, I would argue that almost everybody already has a few things that they would like to do. They already know what they are. They've shut them away possibly because they seem too hard or too difficult, or they're just even embarrassed to even try because they think they'll fail. But I think most people have a few of those things. But if you don't, then I think you go back, this will sound really cheesy, but you go back to Maslow and you say, okay, let me take a look at my life. Let's look at the bottom of the pyramid. And where do I stand? What's my health? And if your health is poor or you're worried about your health in the future, then pick a fitness and health goal because it's better for you and it'll make your life better. If it's professional and you feel like, I'm struggling financially or I have some other financial dream, well, then that's a great place to say, well, then let me take care of that. If there are things that bother you about your life, then those are perfect places to go. And typically, health, money, not in I want to get rich way, but in at least where I have enough money that I can make some choices and feel less stressed about it. Maybe it's family stuff, but I think most people have at least a few things that they would think would be really fun to try. And the thing you have to get over when you're thinking about other goals is this idea that you can only focus on one thing, that we have to have this laser-like focus and we all operate within a niche. I describe it in the book as a serial achiever, which means you can either be a person who works really hard at one thing for a while, gets to a certain level, enjoys it. If you start to not feel like you're getting as much return from that, especially from a self-gratification point of view, then pick something else that you would like to do. You can have 5, 6, 10 of those things over your lifetime, which is really cool. And you don't lose any of that time that you spent on one of your earlier goals because you bring all the intangibles, your willpower, your determination, your ability to learn, what you know about yourself. You bring all that stuff with you to whatever your next pursuit is. I worked in manufacturing for 20 years and then decided to become a writer. And one of my big advantages as a writer is I had that business background. And so people that hired me didn't have to teach me the business side. I understood the business side, so I just wanted to know what you, as my client, wanted me to convey. So you can do that, but you can accomplish multiple things at the same time too, and I think that makes life a whole lot more fun.
So you've interviewed some of the biggest names in business, or certainly celebrities as well, Venus Williams, but Richard Branson and many others. Did they know what they wanted to do, or were they just experimenters?
Richard Branson is the king of experimenting. I'm convinced that he just kind of flits around from idea to idea, but he doesn't have that filter that says, "Oh, but this is a terrible idea." His predisposition seems to be, "I'm going to try this," and some of them fail, and he admits when they fail. But on a larger sense, when you talk about people that have accomplished huge things, whether they're business, entertainment, whatever it is, not the funnest, that's a terrible word. The best part about talking to those folks, and I mean this in the best possible way, is that they are really no different than you and I. They have worked really hard at something and achieved some massive level of success at that something, but otherwise they are not really different. They don't have this special quality that other people don't have. They've just worked really, really hard to achieve something. And I think that's actually empowering and motivating because even if you're on the downside of advantage, there is a lot that you can do if you just apply yourself and give yourself a chance and decide that you will put in the time and the effort to try to get to a better place. Because that's really all that those folks did. Luck does play a part, but I think luck comes from effort and application and putting yourself in the right situations. And sometimes things will go your way. Whereas sitting on your couch and wishing and dreaming, you will never get lucky because you're not in the right situations. But I know that's not the question you asked, but that's the biggest takeaway from talking to those folks. Within a couple of minutes, you realize that, you know what? It's just a person, a person with a very special achievement, but just a person. And I think that's a really empowering and motivating thing because anyone can achieve really cool things if they really try.
Have you heard of a Japanese psychology called Morita Therapy?
No, please tell me.
I think you'd be interested. It's basically all about, and it derived from this Japanese psychologist Morita, that actions are controllable, but thoughts are not. And Morita proposed and applied it to psychotherapy to have his clients act or take action because that was something within your control, right? You could get a sense of agency that way. Thoughts were just random and and incredibly hard. And his point was that they're impossible to control, which is probably true. At least the arising of the thought.
Oh, I love that because you can control what you choose to do. You can always control what you choose to do. but it is hard sometimes to control what you think or what you feel. Um, but you can control what you choose to do. And actually, the control over your actions will make you feel better later. When you were saying this, I thought about working out. And sometimes, I work out every day, but sometimes I really don't want to go to the gym. And I think, I'll give it a miss. I won't go. And if I do skip, I kind of feel bad the rest of the day because I skipped and I gave in. When the days when I really don't want to go, but I say, you know what, but I'm going to go and let's just do this. And I just act. I always feel better about it afterwards. And I am always glad that I did. And so that action actually creates a feeling, whereas my lack of action leaves me with that feeling that isn't a really good one. So that may not be what his point is, but that's how I took it. And I really like that because, you can control what you do. You can't always control what you think and feel, but you can control what you do.
So you talk a lot about working out in the physical realm. So this process of motivation, tell me, so if I know I got to do a push-up, even if I don't want to do it, I know what I'm doing. I know it's a push-up. Tell me how you would apply this to writing. So like, obviously you're way more of the writer I am, but I'm writing posts and podcast posts and blogs and whatever. But sometimes I'm just staring at a blank page. I don't have the push-up in mind. I don't know what to put on the page, right? So that then puts me into the procrastination mode, and it's a vicious circle. Any tips there?
The thing that works for me is because that's the difference between a practical action and a creative action, because the creative action you do require some spark when you're sitting there looking at the page or the screen. What works for me is if I'm struggling like that, I'll go ride a bike. I know that sounds weird, but if I go out and I ride for about 10 minutes and I'm not just piddling along, but I'm actually, let's say I'm averaging, I don't know, about 145, 150 beats a minute. So I'm putting some effort into it. A lot of stuff for me strips away. A lot of the clutter in my mind kind of goes away because you're just stuck with your breathing and your sweat and the pain and everything else. And then oddly enough, I'll think of things, I'll end up writing in my head while I'm doing that. I have no idea why, but it frees me up and I'll have ideas and I'll think, hey, I would like to do this and here's how I could do that. And I come home and it's never as good as it was in my head. I hate to admit, but it's close. But that works really well for me. And I don't know, that only works for me. But I think when you are sitting there and you don't have anything, whether you don't have anything because you're feeling lazy or you don't have anything because you truly don't have anything. And if it's the lazy moment, then I think you have to force through that. If it's wow, I just don't have anything, then you need to find something else to do that allows you to free up your mind a little bit and let things come to you.
Do you have any other practices besides that? Do you meditate or do you have rituals of that nature?
Now, I don't do anything like that, but another thing that I do is because I'll have ideas at odd moments all the time. And so I always have something with me to where I can either write it down or stick a note in my phone or record something on my phone really quick if I have some idea or some thought. And I keep a running list of those things. And I've probably got, at least for articles, say for ink, I've probably got 50 things on a pad. Some of them have been on there for 2 years and I just haven't decided that the time is right or I want to work on them. But if I don't have something that's kind of popped up for me, I can just go look at my pad and go, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that one. And that helps a lot. So keeping because you will have those ideas. It's hard to sit down in front of a piece of paper and say, or a computer screen and say, all right, let's be innovative and creative. But it's really easy to collect the things that you think of in the course of your day.
Yeah, the ideas. So is that like a normal pad and pen that you carry in the car, or is it on your phone, an app, or?
I've got a pad in my backpack because my backpack is really my office because I work from a lot of different places. But I have like notes on my phone. I use a voice recorder on my phone if I'm driving and I want to just do it that way. But then I typically will take them off of those and put it on the pad because something about the visual and actually writing it down helps me. And then if I'm writing it down and I have some things that would flesh it out. So say I came up with a headline. I don't know. I had one time. I wrote one recently about redefining the concept of me time. And I had 5 or 6 bullets in my head that kind of went along with that. And so I went ahead and wrote those down as I was doing it. And then that gave me the outline and the structure of, 1,000-word article. So it actually turned out to be really easy. So when you have it, don't assume that you will remember what you thought of, unless you're way different from me, because I will sit there and think, oh, I had a really good idea the other day. What was that? If I didn't write it down, it is gone.
One of the things you had in the book was when you think probabilistically, you begin to see success as the game it really is. Can you elaborate on that just a bit?
Yeah, that's basically the idea. Let's say we take numbers. If you know that you need to do a certain number of things on a certain basis in order to get to a certain outcome, then if you do those things, your success is basically guaranteed. All you have to do is do your thing. If it's a process that someone has followed that works and you know it works and you agree and commit to following that process yourself, then no longer is it a if kind of a thing. It is more than a when. I like that Gran Fondo we talked about. I have legs of flamingo with envy. I'm not powerful, and I wasn't in good cardio shape. There was nothing that recommended me towards doing cycling at all. But if I did the workouts that my friend Jeremiah gave me, and I worked at it and stuck with it, I was going to be able to do the 100 and some miles. It may not have been at the best time, and I may not have beaten anybody, but I could get there. And I think most of the things we try to achieve, they are not, if you are willing to work at it, you can get almost all the way there. And, say you want to be world class at something, and we'll pretend that that's 100% successful. You may not get to the 100%. You may only get to 85% or 90% or something like that. But think about how great an achievement that is if that pursuit is something that you really care about. And I actually would argue that for most of us, trying to find that extra 10% at the very end is probably not necessarily a waste of time, but you have to put too much time into gaining that last little bit. But you get to a place where the effort and the outcome balances out. And it's like, this is exactly what I want it to be.
Yeah, you've got the law of averages, where people just don't use, and to your point, thinking probabilistically, that I read somewhere you made the point of someone said, I'm only closing 1 out of 5 deals in some sales process. But if you know your numbers, now you can get to the goal because all I need to do is make 100 calls if I need 20, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There was an entrepreneur. That's exactly what she was saying was, man, it seems like I only close 1 out of 5 of my cold calls. And I said, well, how many deals do you need? And I forget what the number was. I think it was 10 a month. And I said, okay, well, then you need to make 50 calls. And she looked at me like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I said, yeah, it does. If that's what you need, then if you do that and your strike rate holds, you'll get to where you want to be. And along the way, you can work on improving, who you call, what your pitch is, how you deal with stuff. So maybe your strike rate goes to 2 to 5 or maybe 3 to 5 or something. And so you can still work on improving. But if you know what you have to do to get to a certain place, then create a process that allows you to do that and you will get the outcome that you need. And while you're at it, then you can work on improving. And she looked at me like, well, I was crazy. But then she ended up, that's actually what they did. And things went really well. And it seems simple, and it is. It just takes a lot of work.
Jeff, this has been great. Thank you so much for jumping on. So is there anything I missed? Anything that you would want to say about this topic that maybe I didn't have the insight to ask?
Oh no, you were great. I guess I would sum up by saying that goals are great, but the use of a goal is really to inform the process you create that would allow you to get there. And then, so pick a goal, create the right process, focus on your process. And then what I always tell people when they say, I have this dream, I want to do X or I want to do Y, I always interrupt them and say, don't tell me your dream. Tell me your plan, because your plan is what will get you to where you want to be. Talking about your dream all day is fine, but your plan is actually the action that you can take to get to where you want to be. So don't tell me your dream. Tell me your plan. And finally, I've yet to meet a really successful person who didn't work really hard to get to where they want to be. And that is a very empowering thing, because you can do that too. And if you have big things that you want to accomplish, if you're listening and you have something big you want to accomplish, you can. You do have it in you. You just have to create a process and follow your process and work hard, and you will get there. And it will be really fun along the way.
I really like your process orientation because even if you don't get to whatever the goal is, that process, if you work it, you've developed some skills, or you have gotten some benefit out of just doing the process, regardless of the actual achievement of that goal.
Yeah, but even if you don't, you will have gained some skill. You'll have learned about yourself. You will probably have met some people you would never have met. You'll have made connections that you never would have made. You might find some other interest that you never knew you would have found. Action creates this really cool, an action is like, the pebble in the pond. The ripples go out from there, and they're always good ripples. And even if you make a mistake, even if you do something and it turns out to be a mistake, well, you can learn from that, adjust from that, and fix it. But if you don't do anything, then nothing happens, and you're right where you are. And someday you're looking back and you're thinking, wow, I wish I had whatever your list of things may be. And that's a terrible time to be wishing, because then you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's the corridor principle. If you go down the hallway, if you get yourself in that hallway, there are multiple doors that are available to you, right? So unless you walk down that corridor, you'll never see those doors. Jeff, thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this. So they can find you on Twitter, right?
Yeah, Twitter's boring though. I don't know. I don't get much out of Twitter, but I'm on LinkedIn and I've got like 960,000 followers or something like that. If you go to inc.com and search my name, I've got like 1,500 articles or so. And my website is jeffhaden.com.
Okay, cool. They can reach out to you, Jeff Haden. Again, thank you so much, Jeff. I really enjoyed not only the book, but this conversation. You were great.
Yeah, thank you. All right, take care.
Well, that is all the time we have today. Please spread the word if you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a review on iTunes and share it with your friends on your favorite social platforms. Big thank you to Sam Williams, my audio guy. Make sure you visit LarryWeeks.com for all my content, and we will talk again soon.